President is doing is what he promised he was going to do. He is going to put American interests first, and he's going to disrupt the trade policy to get to an even and level playing field so that we can compete around the world. That's all we're looking for, is a fair deal that allows our American workers to have an opportunity to succeed.
The chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Republican Texas, Kevin Brady, was quoted as saying, if tariffs on steel and aluminum, tariffs on steel and aluminum imports hurts our efforts to create good-paying U.S. jobs by selling more made-in-America products to customers in these countries. And Senator Orrin Hatch, a Republican in Utah who chairs the Finance Committee, saying tariffs on steel and aluminum imports are a tax hike on Americans and will have damaging consequences for consumers, manufacturers, and workers.
Their concerns legitimate. Obviously, I share those concerns. But about having a different trade policy and a different trade agenda that is ultimately going to strengthen the American consumer position. It's ultimately going to strengthen the American aluminum and steel industry. And from my perspective, that short-term type of concern that so many people are worried about is losing sight on the long-term outcome that I think is achievable here and what the president is doing. And having worked with the trade ambassador, just had a meeting with them yesterday, working with the trade team, working with the administration, I think the administration rightfully deserves an opportunity to go down this path of disruption and tell the world that America's not messing around anymore. We're not going to put up with these unfair practices. And let's face it, what these initial skirmishes are all about is not the real battle. The real battle is taking on China and positioning us against China to say we're not going to put up with any of this unfair practices that they've been engaging in for decades.
How could it be short-term when these countries are threatening to retaliate and go to the World Trade Organization?
Yeah, because there's a process in order for that to occur. And that process, as you often see on our end, when we go to the World Trade Organization and we litigate cases, and we have been successful 99% of the time at the WTO, and the cases that are brought against us, we've been successful in defending them. That essentially tells me that everyone else isn't playing by the rules, but we are. And that takes years to go through that process. So, you know, there's a process. These tariffs don't go in immediately overnight. And what will happen is, I think in the meantime, negotiations will continue. And I think it's in everyone's best interest. Take a deep breath, stay at the table. Worst thing Canada and Mexico could do right now is leave the room, leave the table. And we are seeing some indications, especially from the Canadian negotiators, that that's probably their path that they're trying to elect. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's sustainable for them. They'll come back to the room and they will negotiate. Because you see what happened to Brazil and South Korea. You know, they came to the table, we negotiated, fixed a problem, and now we're having an opportunity to compete with them in a much fairer situation than we did before.
Are you concerned about any long-term diplomatic damage with our allies when you President Emmanuel Macron saying, and the Canadian Prime Minister on Twitter and in a news conference yesterday, saying our soldiers fight side by side? Why are you citing national security concerns in tariffs and then taking a conciliatory approach to China?
No, I think exactly.
When it comes to the ZTE deal.
The ZTE deal and the other issues. I mean, obviously the ZTE deal is a one-off in my humble opinion. The longer play against China is to really hold them accountable on their unfair practices and engagements that they've engaged in over the years. But when it comes to Canada and Mexico, clearly, we are very close allies. And, you know, Greta, I often say this, I'm the youngest of 12. I have 8 older sisters, 3 older brothers. And in our household, we loved each other, we got along, but when we had a difference, we were often cats and dogs for a period of time, but Mom always corralled us, got us together, and we worked it out. That's exactly how I see Canada and Mexico being taken care of. We know there's differences, but we know we are close friends. But stay at the table, we need to negotiate, and in any negotiation, you're not going to get 100% of what you want, and I think everyone recognizes that.